The morning did not begin with the soft touch of sunlight or the gentle chirping of birds. It began with the sound of a dying machine. Inside the small, cramped apartment on the fourth floor, the air was thick with the scent of cheap eucalyptus oil and the metallic tang of old radiators. Anna stood over her son, Leo, watching the way his chest struggled to rise and fall. On the floor beside his bed, a plush bear lay face down. Its internal speaker, damaged during a frantic night of coughing fits, emitted a distorted, mechanical version of a lullaby that sounded more like a death rattle than a song. It was a haunting, rhythmic stutter that felt like an omen. Leo was only 6 years old, but in the gray, sickly light of the early hour, his skin looked like ancient parchment. His fever had spiked to 104 degrees. Anna checked her watch for the 10th time in a minute. Every second was a grain of sand slipping through her fingers, and she was running out of time. She scooped him up, wrapping his small, shivering body in a heavy wool blanket. The elevator in their building had been broken for 3 weeks, a common occurrence in a district that the city council had long since deleted from their maps. Anna took the stairs, her breath hitching in her throat as she descended 4 flights of cracked concrete. When she finally pushed through the heavy, enrusted fire doors into the underground parking garage, she felt a momentary surge of adrenaline that she mistaken for hope. Her old, embattered sedan was parked exactly where she had left it, but that hope vanished the instant she turned the corner. Blocking the entire exit lane, angled with a calculated, arrogant disregard for every living soul in the building, was a Ferrari the color of fresh arterial blood. It was a machine built for a world Anna would never belong to, sitting idle in the gloom of the concrete cavern. Leaning against its driver's side door was Marco Moretti. Every person in this city knew that face. It was the face of a crown prince who had never been told no. He was adjusting his gold cufflinks, his features illuminated by the cold, pale blue glow of a smartphone. He looked bored, as if the very act of existing in the same air as common people was an exhausting chore. Anna approached him, the weight of her son pressing into her arms. She did not scream. She did not beg. She stood 5 feet from him and told him that her son was in respiratory distress and that he needed to move his car immediately. Marco did not even lift his gaze from his screen. He flicked a speck of invisible dust off his Italian silk sleeve and told her that his time was worth $10,000 a second. He told her that right now, she was wasting his money and his patience. He suggested she wait until his associates arrived in an hour or find another way out through the construction bollards. Anna looked at the bollards, then back at the man who thought he owned the road to her son's survival. In that moment, the fear that had been her constant companion for years did not just vanish. It turned into something far more dangerous. The garage was not empty. Shadows moved behind concrete pillars as neighbors, delivery drivers, and the building's janitor began to gather. They watched with bated breath, their eyes darting between the woman with the sick child and the man who carried a name that functioned as a death warrant. The air grew heavy with the unspoken terror that the Moretti family commanded. Marco finally looked up, his eyes as cold and hollow as empty shell casings. He laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed off the low ceiling like a gunshot. He told her she was lucky he did not charge her for the privilege of standing in his shadow. Anna did not respond to the insult. She turned and walked back to her sedan. With a chillingly steady hand, she placed Leo in the back seat, strapping him in as if this were just another ordinary morning. Then she walked to her trunk. She did not reach for her phone to call the police. She knew the local precinct was just another branch of the Moretti Corporation. Instead, she reached past the groceries to the very bottom of the trunk. There she found a 15-foot industrial hauling chain. It was rusted, heavy, and smelled of the shipyard where her father had worked for 40 years before the syndicates broke him. She dragged it out onto the concrete. The sound of the iron links screaming against the stone was the only warning she gave. Marco watched with a smirk, thinking she was going to swing it at him, a desperate gesture he could easily punish. He was wrong. Anna dropped to her knees by the front tire of the Ferrari. She worked with the grim, silent efficiency of a woman who had nothing left to lose. She looped the chain through the intricate spokes of the custom wheel. The rusted iron groaned against the pristine red paint, carving a deep, jagged silver scar into the car's soul. Marco lunged forward, his face twisting into a mask of shock and rage, but Anna stood up before he could reach her. She did not flinch. She did not back away. She wrapped the other end of the chain around a massive steel and concrete support pillar and snapped a heavy brass padlock shut. The garage fell into a silence so absolute it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Marco was paralyzed, staring at his chain prize. He began to scream threats, promising to burn her life to the ground, but Anna stepped into his personal space. She was so close she could smell his expensive cologne. Her voice was a whisper, cold and sharp as a razor. She told him that his car was no longer a vehicle, but a piece of public art dedicated to his own failure. She said that if he tried to drive, he would tear his pride apart, link by link. She told him that while he was playing at being a god, she was just a mother, and that made her the most dangerous thing he would ever encounter. She pointed to the crowd. Dozens of cell phones were out, their lenses reflecting the image of the prince of the city, trapped by a woman with grease on her hands. Anna told him that the social contract was the only thing keeping the people from showing him exactly what they thought of his family, and he had just shredded it. Without waiting for a reply, she got into her car. She backed it up, using every inch of the narrow space, and squeezed past the rear of the Ferrari. As she drove toward the exit, she rolled down her window and looked at the man who was now a prisoner of his own arrogance. She did not throw him the keys. She held them up for the cameras to see, then dropped them down a sewer grate with a final, metallic splash. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and adrenaline. By the time the nurses took Leo from her arms, the video was already being shared by thousands. It was a wildfire of digital defiance. Anna sat in the waiting room, her hands still stained with the rust of the chain. She watched the news on the wall. They were calling her the Red Chain Mother. But as she watched the footage of Marco's face, she realized the magnitude of what she had done. She had not just moved a car, she had challenged a theology of power. 3 hours into the wait, a man in a charcoal suit sat down in the plastic chair next to her. He did not have the loud arrogance of Marco. He had the quiet, terrifying gravity of someone who actually held the strings. He placed a leather briefcase on his knees and offered her $50,000. He told her it was a gift, a way to settle the misunderstanding. All she had to do was sign a paper saying it was a staged event, a prank for a social media channel. Anna looked at the money, then at the hospital doors. She thought about the neighbors who had finally found their voices because of her. She told the man that her son's life was not a prop and that the truth was the only thing the Morettis could not afford to buy. She pushed the briefcase back with a steady hand. The man stood up, adjusted his tie, and told her that by refusing the gold, she had chosen the iron. The man in the charcoal suit disappeared into the sterile white glare of the hospital corridor, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than any threat. Anna sat perfectly still, her back pressed against the hard plastic of the waiting room chair. Every time the sliding glass doors hissed open, she expected to see a team of men with suppressed weapons. Instead, she saw the reality of the digital age. On the television mounted in the corner, her own face stared back at her. The footage from the garage was playing on a constant loop, interspersed with commentary from local news anchors who sounded both thrilled and terrified. They were dissecting the physics of the chain, the legality of her actions, and most of all, the look on Marco Moretti's face. She was no longer just Anna, a mother from the fourth floor. She had been transformed into a symbol, a viral phenomenon, a lightning rod for 20 years of suppressed rage. The hospital staff began to treat her differently. It started with small things. A nurse brought her a cup of coffee without being asked. A doctor, normally harried and dismissive, stopped to give her a detailed update on Leo's condition with a level of respect that bordered on fear. They were not being kind. They were being careful. They did not know if she was a hero or a dead woman walking, and they did not want to be on the wrong side of whichever one it turned out to be. Anna watched them and realized that her anonymity, the only real protection she ever had, was gone. She was now a public figure in a city where the most powerful family preferred to operate in the dark. 4 hours into the night, the atmosphere in the intensive care unit shifted. The ambient noise of the hospital, the distant carts, the hushed conversations, the rhythmic beeps suddenly vanished. It was as if someone had turned a dial, cutting the sound from the world. 2 men in dark overcoats appeared at the entrance of the waiting room. They did not have to say a word. Their presence was a physical weight that cleared the room of every other visitor. They stood like pillars of shadow, their eyes scanning the area before stepping aside to let an older man enter. Silvio Moretti did not look like a monster. He looked like a grandfather who had spent too much time in the sun. He walked with a slight limp, aided by a cane topped with a silver wolf's head. His suit was old-fashioned but impeccably tailored, and his eyes had the clarity of a man who had seen everything and regretted very little. He did not sit in the chair the charcoal-suited man had occupied. He pulled up a stool, sitting directly across from Anna, close enough that she could see the fine network of wrinkles around his eyes. He did not look angry. He looked fascinated. He began to speak about the city, about the way it breathed and the way it bled. He told her about the shipyards where her father had worked, naming the specific pier and the specific foreman who had tried to cheat him out of his pension. He knew the history of her family better than she did. He told her that he respected iron. He said that the world was full of plastic people who broke under the slightest pressure. But she was different. She was a throwback to a harder time. He told her that his son, Marco, was a disappointment, a creature of soft silk and loud noises, who did not understand that true power does not need to scream to be heard. Silvio reached into his pocket and produced a small, silver music box. He set it on the table between them and let it play. The melody was hauntingly familiar. It was the same lullaby the broken teddy bear had been stuttering earlier that morning. Anna felt a cold sweat break out across her neck. Silvio told her that he had been watching her for a long time. He said that he had seen her struggle to pay the rent, seen her skip meals to buy Leo's medicine, and seen the way she never asked for help. He said that a woman with her spirit belonged in a different life. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. He told her that he had already taken the liberty of transferring Leo to a private wing of the hospital. He said the best specialists in the country were currently reviewing the boy's chart. He told her that the hospital bill was no longer her concern. Anna tried to interrupt, to tell him she did not want his charity, but Silvio held up a hand. He said it was not charity, it was a debt of honor. He said she had done him a service by exposing his son's weakness before it could cause real damage to the family business. He stood up, his joints popping in the quiet room. He told her that he had a gift for her, something to replace the old sedan that had so unfortunately caught fire in the parking lot just 20 minutes ago. Anna's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked out the window and saw a column of black smoke rising from the back of the hospital lot. Her car, her only way to escape, the last thing her father had left her, was a charred skeleton. Silvio placed a set of keys on the table. They were the keys to the red Ferrari. He told her that the city needed to see her driving it. He said that from this moment on, everyone would assume she was under his protection. He had already leaked the story to the press that she was his personal consultant, a secret enforcer of family discipline. He told her that by humiliating Marco, She had not destroyed the Moretti name. She had reinforced it. She had shown that the Morettis were so powerful they could afford to be corrected by a woman of iron. He whispered that she was now a part of the family, whether she liked it or not. If she tried to deny it, no one would believe her. If she tried to run, she would find that every door was locked from the outside. As Silvio walked away, the hospital lights flickered and returned to their normal, harsh glow. The nurses returned, their faces masks of subservience. Anna looked down at the keys. The red Ferrari was waiting for her outside, a beautiful, high-speed cage. She looked at her son through the glass of the ICU. He was sleeping, his breathing finally deep and regular. The price of his life was her own. She realized that she had used a chain to stop a car, but the old man had used the car to chain her soul. She picked up the keys, and for the first time that day, she felt the true weight of the iron. She walked out of the hospital into the cool night air. The red Ferrari was parked directly in front of the main entrance, glowing under the halogen lights like a pool of blood. A crowd had gathered, but they were not cheering anymore. They were whispering. They saw the woman who had fought the system, and they saw her walking toward the ultimate symbol of that system. When she pressed the button on the key fob, and the lights of the Ferrari flashed in response, the crowd fell silent. Anna got into the driver's seat. The leather was warm, the smell of luxury thick enough to choke her. She started the engine, and the roar of the supercar felt like a scream that would never end. She drove out of the lot, a prisoner of her own victory, forever tied to the monster she had tried to defy. The streetlights of the city blurred into long, bleeding lines of white and amber as Anna drove the Ferrari through the sleeping suburbs. The car was too fast, too responsive. It felt like a living thing beneath her, a predator that she had been forced to leash to her own wrist. Every time she shifted gears, the mechanical whine of the engine sounded like a mockery of the silence she had lived in for years. She was driving toward the only home she knew, but the closer she got to the fourth-floor apartment, the more she realized that home no longer existed. The woman who had left that building 5 hours ago with a dying child was gone. In her place was a ghost in a red supercar. When she turned onto her street, she saw that the news vans had already arrived. Their satellite dishes reached into the rainy sky like skeletal fingers, and their bright floodlights turned her humble neighborhood into a movie set. As the Ferrari approached, the reporters surged forward, their microphones thrust toward the windshield like spears. They were screaming questions about her secret ties to Silvio, about the staged nature of the confrontation, about her sudden rise to the elite. Anna kept the windows rolled up. She could see her neighbors peeking through their blinds, their faces twisted with a mixture of envy and betrayal. They had seen the fire at the hospital. They had seen her get into the car. The narrative was already written, and no amount of truth could erase it. She parked the car in her old spot, the red paint looking violently out of place against the cracked concrete and oil stains. As she stepped out, the flashes of the cameras were so intense they felt like physical blows. She did not look at the reporters. She did not look at the cameras. She walked straight to the entrance of her building, her hand gripping the heavy iron keys so tightly the metal bit into her palm. On the front door, someone had already spray-painted a message in jagged black letters. "How much did he pay for your soul?" Anna did not stop to wipe it away. She climbed the stairs, the sound of her own footsteps echoing in the hollow stairwell. Inside her apartment, the silence was absolute. The broken teddy bear was still lying on the floor, its synthetic heart finally quiet. Anna sat on the edge of Leo's empty bed and looked at her hands. They were still stained with the rust from the chain, a mark of the moment she thought she had won. She realized then that Silvio Moretti did not play a game of strength. He played a game of mirrors. He had not punished her with violence because violence would have made her a martyr. Instead, he had punished her with a gift, turning her into a villain in the eyes of the only people who ever cared about her. He had isolated her in a world of luxury where his was the only hand she could hold. The burner phone Silvio's man had left in the car vibrated in her pocket. There was a single message from an unlisted number. It was a photograph of the sewer grate where she had dropped the keys to the padlock. The grate had been removed, and the keys were sitting on a velvet cushion. Below the photo were the words, "Nothing stays buried forever." Anna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. It was a reminder that even her smallest acts of defiance were owned by the family. They had retrieved the keys as a trophy, a memento of the day a common woman tried to chain the wind. The next 48 hours were a slow descent into a gilded purgatory. Every time she left the building to visit Leo at the hospital, the black SUVs followed her at a distance of exactly 30 feet. They did not interfere, they simply existed, a constant reminder of the perimeter Silvio had drawn around her life. At the hospital, Leo was recovering with miraculous speed. He was in a suite that cost more per night than Anna made in a year. He had his own private nurse and a television that played every cartoon he ever wanted. When he saw Anna, he smiled and asked when they could go home. Anna could not tell him that they had no home to go to. She could not tell him that his health was the currency Silvio used to buy her silence. On the third night, a knock came at her door. It was not the rhythmic, heavy knock of a debt collector or the frantic tap of a neighbor. It was a soft, deliberate sound. When Anna opened the door, she found Marco Moretti standing in the hall. He was not wearing his suit. He was in a dark hoodie and jeans, his face bruised from where his father had presumably reminded him of his failure. He did not try to push his way in. He stood in the shadows of the hallway and looked at her with a hatred that was so pure, it was almost beautiful. He told her that his father was old, and that his father's obsession with iron and tradition would die with him. He told her that the car she was driving was fitted with a GPS tracker and a remote kill switch. He said that the moment Silvio's heart stopped beating, Anna's would too. Anna looked at him, and for the first time since the garage, she felt a flicker of the old fire. She did not back away. She told him that she had already faced death in the eyes of her son, and a boy with a hoodie and a grudge did not scare her. She told him that she had chained his pride once, and she could do it again. Marco laughed, a dry, rattling sound. He told her she was already dead. She just had not stopped breathing yet. He turned and vanished into the darkness of the stairwell, leaving behind the smell of expensive tobacco and impending ruin. Anna closed the door and leaned against it. She realized that she was caught between two monsters, the father who wanted to own her and the son who wanted to destroy her. She looked at the red keys sitting on her kitchen table and knew she had to make a choice. She could accept the silk and the shadow, living out her days as a hollowed-out trophy of the Moretti family, or she could do the one thing Silvio did not expect. She could take the iron he respected so much and turn it into a weapon that would shatter the mirrors he had built around her. She went to her closet and pulled out her father's old shipyard jacket. In the pocket, she found a heavy steel bolt cutter. It was the only thing she had left that did not belong to the Morettis. She looked at the burner phone, then at the keys to the Ferrari. The game was not over. Silvio thought he had bought her soul, but he had forgotten one thing about the people of the shipyards. They knew how to build things, but they were even better at tearing them down. Anna sat down at her table and began to write a letter, not to the police and not to the press, but to the people of the city. She was going to tell them exactly what the red car cost, and then she was going to show them how to break the chain once and for all. The letter was not a plea for help. It was a manual of resistance. Anna spent the next 6 hours writing until her fingers cramped and the ink smeared across the page. She wrote about the $60,000 that were never signed for, the explosion of her old sedan, and the way the hospital suite had become a velvet cell for her son. She did not use the emotional language of a victim. She used the cold, precise terminology of a witness. She detailed every name Silvio had mentioned and every threat Marco had whispered. Most importantly, she wrote about the tracker and the kill switch in the car, exposing the gift as a lethal trap. She was not just telling a story, she was providing a map of the Moretti infrastructure. When the first light of dawn began to gray the edges of the city, Anna did not reach for the burner phone. Instead, she took her father's old bolt cutters and walked down to the garage one last time. The red Ferrari sat there, glowing with a malevolent beauty. She knew the black SUVs were watching from the street, but she did not care. She climbed into the driver's seat, but she did not start the engine. She reached under the dashboard, her fingers tracing the wiring until she found the heavy, unauthorized module that did not belong to the Italian factory. With a single, forceful snap of the bolt cutters, she severed the connection to the kill switch. The car's alarm chirped once, a short, strangled cry, and then went silent. She was no longer a passenger in her own execution. She drove out of the garage, not toward the hospital, but toward the heart of the city's industrial district, where the old shipyard stood. This was the territory the Morettis had abandoned years ago, a place of rusted cranes and hollowed-out warehouses. As she drove, she saw the black SUVs in her rearview mirror. They were closing the distance, realizing she was off her designated route. She did not panic. She pushed the Ferrari to its limit, the engine screaming as it reached 120 miles per hour on the narrow, potholed roads. She was not running away. She was leading them into the iron graveyard where she held the home field advantage. She reached the main pier, the very place where her father had spent his life. She slammed on the brakes, the tires smoking as the supercar skidded to a halt at the very edge of the deep, dark water. The black SUVs arrived seconds later, skidding into a semicircle, trapping her against the pier's end. Silvio's man in the charcoal suit stepped out, his face no longer calm. He told her she was making a mistake that could not be undone. He told her the old man was disappointed. Anna did not say a word. She held up the severed kill switch module and the letter she had written, which she had already scanned and set to auto-publish to every major news outlet in the country if she did not enter a code into her own phone every 20 minutes. She looked at the man and told him that the iron he respected so much was about to sink. She told him that she was tired of being a symbol for their power. In a sudden, violent movement, she stepped out of the car, put it in neutral, and pushed with every ounce of strength she possessed. The $500,000 machine, the symbol of her corruption and her son's safety, rolled slowly over the edge of the pier. It hit the water with a massive, echoing splash, sinking rapidly into the silt and darkness below. The charcoal-suited man lunged forward, but it was too late. The red ghost was gone. Anna stood at the edge, her father's jacket flapping in the wind. She told the men that they could kill her now, but if they did, the letter would publish immediately, and the city would see the evidence of the hospital's complicity and the arson. She told them she had already moved Leo. In the middle of the night, with the help of the same janitor Silvio had overlooked, she had smuggled her son out of the private wing and into a charity clinic under a different name. The Morettis had spent so much time watching the front door that they forgot she knew the service entrances of this city by heart. The men in the suits hesitated. For the first time, the Moretti machine was paralyzed. They could not kill her without triggering a scandal that would bring the federal government down on their heads. And they could not buy her because she had already thrown their greatest bribe into the harbor. Anna walked past them, her footsteps steady on the rusted metal of the pier. She did not look back. She walked out of the industrial zone and into the crowded streets of the morning commute, disappearing into the mass of ordinary people who were just starting their day. The final act of her defiance was not a roar, but a disappearance. 6 months later, the Moretti family was under 3 separate federal investigations, triggered by an anonymous document known as the Iron Letter. Marco was in hiding, and Silvio had retired to a villa under constant surveillance. In a small town 3 states away, a woman named Anna worked in a quiet library. She did not have a red car, and she did not have $50,000. But every afternoon, she walked to a local park and watched a healthy, laughing boy named Leo play on the swings. She still carried a heavy iron key in her pocket, not to a car, but to a small, modest house she owned in her own name. She had broken the chain, and this time, she had made sure the world saw exactly how it was done.